midway.
Okay.
Am I fine here? It's 5 days to D-Day. It's really the business end of COP17. Good morning and welcome to the program. For myself, Blaine Herman. We're coming to you live from the Nkosi Albert Lutuli International Convention Center here at the Nerve Center. It is really the nerve center of COP17 talks. Well, we've had talks over the last couple of weeks, or days rather, that's been described as positive. That's coming from the COP17 president, Maite Nkone Mashabane. She described it as positive as well as fruitful. Now, she did say that a number of key issues were given due prominence over the week or so. One of them being the Green Climate Fund. You'll know the Green Climate Fund is to aid developing countries in order to help mitigate and adapt to the forces of climate change. She is pretty confident that we should get some sort of finalization here in Durban. Also the big one, the Kyoto Protocol. Will it die in Durban? That's what some of the skeptics are saying. They're saying that certain countries are perceived to be dragging their feet here in certain issues. But on the other hand, there are those delegates that are hopeful that we can actually get a binding deal in Durban. Maybe a second commitment period from Kyoto. We'll have to see. Well, the COP17 process really moves up a notch. It goes to something called the high-level segment. We're going to see some 12 heads of state, some 130 ministers from across the globe coming here, descending on the port city of Durban, kicking up a notch the COP17 talks here. Now, we got all angles covered. We've got a crack team of journalists fanned out across the port city of Durban, covering various issues in order to get you the full story of how COP17 is actually developing. Let's check in with them now to see what's lined up for today. We start off with Nomawethu Solwande. Nomawethu, how's things going?
Good morning, Blaine. Well, we're just outside the ICC, and later on we'll be speaking to Robbie Ramiro, who is the United Nations Ambassador of Youth for the Environment. We'll also be speaking about a new newspaper called the Green Herald. It's basically about biodiversity, a mock newspaper which shows us what the world will look like in 2020 if we take care of our biodiversity. But for now, let's go to Asanda and see what she has in store for us.
Well, Nomawethu, today I'm a soccer star. Okay, maybe not quite, but I am at the Moses Mabhida Stadium talking to members of parliament about the role of legislators in making climate change a real impactful issue for people not only in South Africa but across the world. The Interparliamentary Union is meeting right here at Moses Mabhida Stadium. We'll chat a bit about that a bit later into the program, but let's go back to Blaine and let's start it on the show.
Asana, thank you very much indeed. You stand by. We'll come back to you a little later on. Peter Ndora is in Johannesburg. He'll be back with you tomorrow. Now then, there's been some action already in Durban. We're told some 7 Greenpeace officials have been arrested. This happened earlier this morning. Apparently, they tried to hoist a poster in one of the Durban hotels. We'll get more details for you as the program progresses. Now, it's been a busy weekend indeed in Durban, from activities for delegates, entertaining delegates, as well as a range of concerts, I understand, that happened. But also on Saturday, there was the all-important Global Day of Action. Our cameras were there. This report by Njanji Chake.
Young, intelligent and concerned about the environment, COP17 has been flooded with youth. These Canadians protesting the use of coal-based energy. They hope to raise funds from this symbolic bake sale and want their government to commit to a binding deal.
Canada is not rejecting Kyoto because they want a better agreement. They're rejecting Kyoto because they want to allow the tar sands and the polluting industries in Canada continue to go ahead.
At the Speaker's Corner, snowballing demonstrations, a symbolic funeral to bury King Coal. They want the world to go green.
We do what we can, and we're working really hard, and we are making progress now, but it is a big problem that we're not sitting at the table.
Although they make up the largest percentage of the world population, young people are not really represented at the negotiation table. And when the final draft is adopted at the end of COP17, their future would have been decided by politicians. The executive secretary interacted with young people.
These are decisions that governments take with huge political and economic consequences for their governments. It is the government representatives that need to take that risk.
Activists buried their heads in the sand and displayed the national flags of culprit carbon emitters. Njanji Chauke, SABC News, Durban.
Civil society indeed adding their voices and exerting as much pressure on world governments as possible. Well, what can we expect this week? It kicks up a notch with the high-level segment. I had a chance to speak to the ambassador at large for COP17, Nozipho Diseko, earlier on. Take a listen. Coming to you live from the Nkosi Albert Lutuli International Convention Center here in Durban, where it was really the nerve center of what's going on in COP17. As I said, it's the high-level segment that starts this week. In fact, tomorrow we can expect some 12 heads of state as well as some 130 ministers to descend on the port city of Durban. We have with us a special guest. Her title is Ambassador at Large to COP17. Her name is Nozipho Diseko. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Morning Live. Firstly, Ambassador at Large, what's your role here at COP17?
Morning, Blaine, Vuyo, Lian, and the viewers. Well, my role has been, it began early in the year as soon as Minister Nkwana Mashabane was given the task of being president of the COP. And what an ambassador at large does is to move the negotiators and the countries towards convergence in the creation and the construction of a deal. And that work is never finished until you get to Durban. And I'm paralleled by the minister who's had her own consultations, as I've been consulting with the countries, literally in and out of the country, in and out of the country. So this is the culmination of work that we've done for the entire year.
I'm sure you've been busy over the past week. It has been a week that's been described as relatively positive in terms of the talks. What can we expect this week?
Well, let me just comment first about last week, a week when where a lot of constructive work was done and finished. Two main bodies of the COP have finished their work on Saturday. There are only 2 outstanding issues that need to be dealt with, that will be dealt with by the president of the COP. Parallel to that, last week we started the parties talking about what should be the main elements of the deal in relation to the Kyoto Protocol and the second commitment period, and on the other hand, what should be done in the long term to move the process forward. So this week, Minister ministers started arriving on Saturday, and in advance of their presidents, who arrive tomorrow. And there's a high-level segment, more or less like the General Assembly of the COP begins tomorrow, where high-level, where heads of state will be making statements about their expectations. The heads of state are not negotiators. They'll just be making statements at a political level, guiding the process as to what they would like to do. President Zuma will make a statement welcoming, and the Secretary General of the UN will also make a statement to give direction to the process.
Who can we expect here in terms of heads of state?
Oh, it's a variety. I can't think of the list off the top of my head because it's under construction. Countries are inscribing, but I do know that we have a fair number of African heads of state. Yes.
Can we expect the big nations such as the US, China here?
We don't know. It's up to parties. They can decide at the last minute that they are coming. So we can't say definitively that they will come or not come.
Now, when we talk about high-level segment, how does it actually work?
As I said to you, it's more like the General Assembly of the UNFCCC, where heads of state and senior politicians from countries make statements about their expectations, what it is they would like to have out of the COP and the CMP, and what is it that they would like to have going into the future. Some may criticize where we've come from, point out deficiencies, with a view to laying out guidance as to what we do as we go forward. But the beginning of that also marks the entry point of ministers into the negotiations as as chief negotiators of their countries.
So come Friday, what can we expect?
Agreements that will be part of an overall agreement in relation to the COP. We did a lot of work on technology. We've done a lot of work on adaptation. We've done a lot of work on capacity building. We are doing, there's a whole range of work that is being done. As I said, a great deal of it was completed on Saturday, around about 4 o'clock in the morning, I believe, with one of the groups, and another at about 2 o'clock. This is how hard these guys work. So we expect good results.
Nosibu Duseko, the ambassador at large for COP17. It's around 10 o'clock now. Let's take a bit of a break. We're coming to you live from the International Convention Center. We'll be back after this. Stay with us. Live from the International Convention Center, we're talking COP17. It's the final week here in Durban. Let's go across now to Nomawethu Solwana. She has a guest. Nomawethu, how's things going on your side?
Good morning, Blaine. Well, indigenous people are the first people to experience the catastrophic effects of climate change. However, at this conference, they are just observers. They won't be directly involved in the decision making. To tell us more about this, we are now joined by Robbie Ramiro, who is the United Nations Ambassador for Youth and Environment. Robbie, just briefly, when you talk about indigenous people, how are they affected by climate change?
There's a lot of indigenous peoples throughout the world that live at the point of impact, and they're amongst the first that are experiencing the effects of climate change, but they're also amongst the first who have the wisdom and experience in adapting to the impacts of climate change. So at a conference like this, you would think that their voice would be the most important.
we talk about indigenous people being affected. Let's go into detail about this. Droughts, food, crops dying. Let's go into detail.
Well, I think that, what's happening here is there's a lot of solutions, or should I say false solutions, to climate change being presented. And unfortunately, there's a lot of programs like RED type programs and RED, which are programs that affect indigenous peoples. They are programs, in my opinion, that are going right after the resources in indigenous peoples' lands and territories, and they violate the rights of indigenous peoples. We're here as caretakers of Mother Earth in all our relations. And as caretakers, we have to practice no harm policies. So if there's programs that are supposedly a solution to climate change, then why are they causing harm? We have to get rid of this old model of thinking, and if we're really going to make changes to climate change, we have to listen to the voices of our ancestors. We have to hear the warnings of nature and First Peoples, and we have to respect that, because it's getting worse and worse moment by moment. The nature is speaking out to us. The planet is heating up. The hurricanes, the volcanoes, the tsunamis, the earthquakes, the tornadoes, all these things are getting more violent, and they're increasing in power, and they're coming more and more and more and more, just as our ancestors predicted.
You're also a musician. Talk us through about your latest work called Who's Gonna Save You? Just the pictures that you've used and what you focused on.
Who's Gonna Save You is a music picture. It's a combination of music video and motion picture woven into a poetic call to consciousness for the restoration of life and balance. And it's about an Apache teenage skateboarder who's skating through New Orleans, through the 9th Ward, 5 years post-Katrina, where Hurricane Katrina hit. And as he's skating through, he's having visions of natural and man-made disasters and the aftermath of corporate greed and corruption and relocation and poverty, which is the worst form of violence. So all these things are connected to climate change. And you have a lot of multinational corporations that are major lobbyists presenting false solutions so they can keep on polluting. And the things that I'm hearing presented here, and the things that people are having trouble with, indigenous peoples are having trouble understanding this. If we're talking about climate change and protecting the earth, then that's what we need to be talking about. If we're talking about making money in business as usual with these false solutions, well, that's just not cool. You know what I mean? It's just not what's happening here. I mean, we need to unite together. It's indigenous people as all people, and we need to stand up for the rights of Mother Earth, for the rights of indigenous peoples, those who are the caretakers, because it's going to come down to this. You're either a caretaker or you're a predator. And if you're a predator, you are not here on behalf of Mother Earth, and you're not here to resolve this global crisis of climate change.
Thank you very much for your time. Well, that was Robbie Ramiro. He is the United Nations Ambassador of Youth for the Environment. He's here to represent the indigenous people, and he says that they should have a voice, and he's looking forward that beyond this climate change conference, they will have a voice and things will change. Back to you, Blaine.
Nomoecha, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, on this inside the ICC, there's some serious talk happening. But outside, on the fringes, there's the practical steps that are being taken. There's some nifty green ideas and inventions and gadgets that's on the floor at the exhibition center. And apparently, electric cars are all the rage. Our journalist on the beat, once again, is Nomoecha.
Yes, just like any other car, it will move you from point A to point B. The only difference with this one is that it does not use petrol. It can be charged from purely renewable energy. Energy sources such as solar and wind power are believed to be the future. The launch of these cars in South Africa, as well as other countries around the world, will play a critical role in achieving COP17's goals of reducing gas emissions.
This is a fully electric battery vehicle. So it works in many ways, in the same way as your mobile phone. You're charging it into the power supply and using electricity to charge the battery, which is located at the bottom of the vehicle. You have two charging solutions. So you have a slow charging option, which takes around about 8 hours. And we also have a quick charging solution, which takes the battery up to 80% in a 25-minute charge.
The choice is fairly wide. But if you're more the daring type, this sports car might just be the one to blow your hair back. It's fast, but the message remains the same. 100% electric, zero emissions. The Aifambeni bike is also another option. Slower, but it will get you there. It's all about rethinking mobility. On the other side of the exhibition center, the message of reducing gas emissions continues. This time, it's not about rechargeable cars, but on how normal cars can start to use hydrogen to reduce greenhouse gases by up to 80%. And motorists can save up to 26% on fuel.
We have an electrolysis system here that produces hydrogen gas only whilst the engine is running. We do not store hydrogen gas. That could be dangerous. The gas is produced on demand as the engine needs to use it. The system is a retrofit and it can fit any existing diesel or petrol engine on any make or model vehicle.
According to Siemens, the level of man-made carbon emissions worldwide climbed to a new record of 30 million tons in 2010. It has therefore become imperative for everyone to start doing their part. The home of Joule plant will be East London, and the car itself will only be launched in South Africa in 2015. Nomawetu Solwandle, SABC News, Durban.
As the saying goes, sweet rides indeed. It's coming up to 10 minutes past 10. When we come back from a break, we talk green jobs. Stay with us. Live from the ICC. Now let's head off to People's Space, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, is where civil society C17 are meeting. They gather there to exert enough pressure on world governments in order to find a binding deal and a lasting solution in the fight against climate change. Let's talk green jobs now. Brian Ashley from the organization 1 Million Jobs Campaign joins us now live. Brian, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Morning.
Brian,
good to be here with you.
Firstly, tell us, what is a green job, Brian?
Well, actually, we are talking about climate jobs, and we distinguish climate jobs from green jobs in the fact that climate jobs are those jobs that directly reduce our emissions. So, for example, by switching to renewable energy, building lots of wind and solar power, those would be climate jobs. Whereas green jobs are all the type of good environmentally friendly things that we do. So our specific focus is on climate jobs, and we are saying that it's possible in the context of South Africa to move to a low carbon economy, and that would entail us having to do many things. We would have to, as I say, build thousands and thousands of wind farms, solar powered plants. We'd have to build a public transport system, and that means we would be providing many jobs for people. And we need these desperately because, as you know, we are facing not just a environmental crisis as manifested by the climate crisis, but we are facing a very deep economic crisis at a global level. But in South Africa, it's very particularly manifested with our huge unemployment situation.
Exactly, Brian. You know, you're talking about 1 million jobs. You talk at a time where people are often losing their jobs. Do you think the 1 million mark is plausible?
Absolutely. What we have done in the Million Climate Jobs campaign is we've brought together many different organizations and movements into a very intensive research program which we are launching tomorrow here at the People's Space, which indicates how we can exactly create these million climate jobs, how many jobs in renewable energy are possible within the next 10 years. We are saying that it's possible for us to build 50% of our energy to be provided through renewable energy. That alone should create 150,000 permanent jobs. Similarly, in public transport, by expanding the public transport system, we would be able to, just by taking 10% of the current cars off the road, we would be able to provide another 70,000 direct climate jobs. And so we say, in terms of retrofitting our buildings and housing, in terms of moving away from industrial agriculture, which is quite intensive in its emissions, to sustainable small-scale organic agriculture, that too would create many jobs. I should explain that when we're talking about these climate jobs, we're talking about public sector jobs mainly. In other words, the campaign is a demand that the government reallocates its resources to hire people to do these things. And we say that because the issue is urgent. We are facing emergency when we think about the context of the mass unemployment crisis, something like 25% officially, which when it was a similar scale in the United States, it was a period of the Great Depression and the New Deal that Roosevelt put in place. And within a short space of time in the US, they created something like 2 million jobs. So it's absolutely feasible in the context of South Africa. I would say it's not just feasible, it's absolutely necessary if we are going to defend ourselves from the consequences of the environmental and economic crisis that we're facing.
Let's just give it a bit of a benchmark, Brian. Renewable energy is costly. Do you actually see the sector up and running within, I think you said 10 years?
Well, we are working from a very low base at the moment. We ought to have made lots more progress in a context in which we have, a mass and abundance of solar possibilities, wind possibilities. I'm almost being blown away here now speaking to you. These we should be tapping to build our renewable energy industry. If the government, if the state makes a commitment to do this, we can find the resources to build the wind energy, the solar energy plants that are absolutely required. And we need to use our existing coal resources now to be able to manage and oversee this transition to what we call a low-carbon economy.
Brian Ashley from 1 Million Jobs campaign, thank you very much indeed. He's coming to us live from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Well, South Africa is the 4th country to have something called an accredited national entity. What is this exactly? Well, I have it in front of me. It will actually translate into direct access to the UNFCCC Adaptation Fund. Let's find out more about this now. We're joined by Dr. Martin Krauser. He's from the United Nations Development Program. Doctor, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Firstly, let's just talk about this funding. What is it all about?
Funding for meaningful climate action is, of course, a very important element. It has become also a bottleneck because for countries to take action to finance renewable energy technologies, for example, or to finance climate adaptation action, they found themselves in a position where there is often a lack of financing. So the international donor community has an important role to play to provide financing, and they are doing it, for example, through the Climate Adaptation Fund, through the GEF, through the Green Climate Fund, which is being negotiated here. This is, of course, a very important contribution from the international donor community to make financing available. But that alone is not enough. What we need to do is to create an environment where private sector invests in particular technologies such as renewables. Often there are policy incentives that are not conducive for private sector to invest. If you have a country, for example, where you have subsidies for fossil fuels, that is a disincentive then for the private sector companies to invest in renewable energy technologies. So our work and the work of many of our partners is to help countries to create an enabling environment for private sector to invest in clean technologies.
At the moment, Doctor, is there any money in the fund?
There is money in various funds. We have, for example, the adaptation fund that you have mentioned. In the adaptation fund, there is, I don't know exactly how much at the moment because it's an ongoing replenishment, but several $100 million. And that money is available to countries for climate adaptation action. Now, South Africa, as you have mentioned also, is one of the countries who has successfully applied to directly access those funds. What that means is South Africa now can prepare proposals and submit them for funding to the Adaptation Fund and then channel this international donor grant funding to meaningful projects in South Africa.
You make it sound very simple, but I'm sure it's a much more complicated process like that. For instance, South Africa, it has its fair share of poverty, it has its fair share of unemployment. How simple would it be for a country like ours to gain these funds?
Yeah, it is not that easy, as you said. It's indeed what needs to be done is to prepare a good proposal. Because these projects are evaluated upon certain criteria and the country has to be able to prepare a good proposal. Now, South Africa has a lot of capacity, has a lot of intellectual capacity, institutional capacity to prepare and to implement good projects. And we from the United Nations Development Programme have been supporting South Africa over the last 15 years with a number of both renewable energy and also climate adaptation projects. And we are a partner of the South African government and of many other entities here in the country to help them. And that is the role of the international organizations. If there is a bottleneck, if there are problems in preparing and implementing such projects, the international organizations are ready to help.
We were just speaking to Brian Ashley about renewable energy actually being costly. How do you plan to adapt to that?
Yeah. It is true that renewable energy is still costly, although it is much more competitive now than it was, let's say, five years ago. Costs for solar photovoltaic, for example, or for wind energy has come down significantly. So the financing gap is getting smaller. But still, renewable energy is costly. So what we need to do is we need to blend and mix different financing instruments. What that means is if you have a company who wants to invest in, let's say, a particular technology such as wind, the government must provide incentives for that. You need to create things like a feed-in tariff. South Africa has done this, and the wind industry here in the country was absent 8 years ago when I was living here. But now we have a wind industry which has started to develop, and that is thanks to policy incentives that the government has given for the investors who want to put their money in such technologies.
Let's leave it there. Dr. Martin Krauser, thank you very much indeed. He's from the United Nations Development Programme. Let's take a bit of a break. When we come back, we head off to the Moses Mabhida Stadium. Stay with us.
Well, in this big debate about climate change, one of the bigger issues for each country is that it needs legislation in place to give direction on climate change policies and how they will be implemented. As we said earlier, the Interparliamentary Union is meeting here at the Moses Mabhida Stadium to discuss its declarations that will go into the COP17 conference. I have with me a member of our parliament who is with me right now, Mr. Cedric Frolick, to talk to us a bit about how does the IPU fit into the COP17 process.
Good morning. We have gathered here today at the Moses Mabhida Stadium representatives from more than 150 parliaments across the world, which are part of the Interparliamentary Union. The role of the Interparliamentary Union is to provide a platform for legislators to come and discuss important issues that cut across national divides. And in this instance, it was thought to be imperative that the IPU convene a meeting of all members of parliament here in Durban so that we can also get their views in terms of the negotiations that is taking place. It is a valuable platform where members can interact with one another and identify and isolate those issues that the negotiators can't agree upon.
What type of issues are we talking about, for instance, when you talk about these issues that legislators need to bring into the table?
One of the key issues that will be emerging today will be around the second commitment period for the Kyoto Protocol. And the South African Parliament's position is very clear that the second commitment period is necessary. We'll also discuss the operationalization of the Green Climate Fund to see to it that developing and undeveloped countries have access to the fund as easy as possible. And then thirdly, we will also discuss the Adaptation Committee, which is also currently being negotiated by the different negotiators.
How do the different legislatures work to make sure, like for instance, let's take the South African Parliament. How do you make sure that the issues that are discussed at COP17 are put into law so that they have effect when it comes to climate change?
Part of the session that we are going to have today is to reflect on the lawmaking process and what progress has been made, and indeed a lot of progress has been made. In terms of the South African Parliament, we processed the Green Paper on climate change and also the White Paper. So what is crucial is, apart from having these big gatherings where all the countries of the world sit together, is for individual parliaments to go back and to make the laws. That is the role of parliament. And to oversee the effective implementation of those laws and to keep the executive accountable for the promises that they make. A promise made should be a promise that is being kept.
For over 100 countries that subscribe to the Interparliamentary Union, just like the COP17 process, there's been differences of opinions by regions and hemispheres on positions. Is there some sort of consensus in the IPU about which positions to take into COP?
In terms of today's meeting, the IPU requested the South African Parliament to come up with a draft declaration. That declaration was drafted towards the end of June, and it has gone to the IPU meeting that took place in Switzerland. A lot of comment has been received about it. We have reached common ground in terms of the text that is there, and we are absolutely sure that around the issues of the Kyoto Protocol and the Green Climate Fund, that substantial progress will be made.
Thank you very much, sir. That's Mr. Cedric Frolick, a member of the South African Parliament, talking about how the Interparliamentary Union, parliaments of different parts of the world, are meeting today to discuss their own declarations that will influence legislation that the different countries make from the commitments that come out of here at COP17. Let's go back to Blaine at the ICC.
Asanda, thank you very much indeed. We're live from the ICC here in Durban. COP17 talks. We getting into the nitty-gritties now. It's the business end of talks, as we mentioned. Some 12 heads of state are scheduled to come here tomorrow, as well as some 130 ministers planning to kick off the high-level segment here in Durban. Now, let's head back to civil society space. It's the people space at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. It's where we find Caston Tanyane. He's from the Lesotho Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Caston, hi, how are you doing?
Things are going very well.
Good.
I'm going to talk about climate change.
Indeed you are, Caston. Well, you're going to talk to us.
Of youth.
Yes, Caston, you're going to talk to us about youth and climate change. Before we touch on the youth part of it, just tell us in terms of climate change, how's Lesotho looking at the moment?
Climate change in Lesotho has had a negative impact because in the past we used to rely entirely in agriculture as far as our economy is concerned. And in 1986 we were even a granary of South Africa. We were feeding South Africa, but nowadays the position is worse. it's South Africa which is even feeding us in terms of food security.
Gaston, yes, indeed. You mentioned your help towards South Africa. South Africa often relies heavily on Lesotho, well, in part, with regards to water supply. Is the water in the beautiful area of Lesotho still safe?
Yeah, the water is still safe, but most of the wells and other sources, they have been affected negatively by climate change. It is in the mountains where the water is safe, but in other sources, due to drought, this has a negative impact. And indeed,
talk about that more often, Gaston. You mentioned, other climatic impacts. Could you just describe some of those other climatic impacts? You mentioned the drought part. Is it that dire?
Some of the impacts includes unemployment, lack of opportunities in education, also the HIV and AIDS part, which has been increased due to climate change, rural and urban migration, and increased poverty, leading to great destitution.
Okay, let's just leave it there, Gaston. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Gaston Tanyane is from the Lesotho Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Thank you very much indeed. He's coming to us live from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Let's check in with Nomawetu now. Nomawetu.
Thank you, Blaine. Yes, we're still standing outside the ICC. And earlier on, I'd said I'd talk more about the Future Herald, which is a newspaper being printed for the first time at this conference. To tell us more about what this newspaper is all about, we are now joined by Crystal Mays, who is from Sanby. Crystal, what is this newspaper all about?
Hi, Nomaweto. This newspaper, the Future Herald, is a newspaper from December 2020. And it really is a newspaper that is coming with good news about how we've chosen today to take care of our ecosystems and our biodiversity in a way in which helps to improve service delivery and make us more resilient in the face of climate change.
Tell us what's in the paper today. What can people look forward to in the Future Herald?
In the Future Herald today, we can read about apocalypse averted in the city of Johannesburg. Johannesburg decided in 2012 to manage and restore its wetlands and important ecological corridors. And so in the face of huge floods in December 2020, these wetlands helped avert major flooding in the city by absorbing and regulating the flood.
So what will our biodiversity look like in 2020 if we keep it healthy?
It'll be thriving, it'll be purifying our water, it'll be preventing storm surges from the sea ruining our dunes, because we will have intact, healthy dune systems. And we will, at the same time as just preventing disasters associated with climate change, we will have created thousands and thousands of jobs linked to the restoration and care of our ecosystems. And we also will have improved service delivery at local municipal level.
I'm sure people watching this program now are wondering, where can they get this newspaper? How much are they going to pay for it?
They're going to get the paper free at the conference. They can pick it up at the ICC, or you can go to the Biodiversity and Jobs stand at the Climate Change Response Expo, which is just across the road. We will also be making it available online at the SANBI, the Department of Environment Affairs, and the SANParks websites in the next few days. So do look out for it.
And beyond COP17, will we see the Future Herald or not?
We certainly will see the Future Herald. We plan to release it a couple of times a year, and it's really linked to the sector's biodiversity jobs campaign. And you will certainly see more of it at other big events throughout the year.
Thank you very much for your time. Well, that was Crystal Mays from Sanby telling us more about the Future Herald, a newspaper that's been printed for the first time at this conference, and it really just encourages people to take care of their biodiversity. Well, that's all we have down here. It's back to you, Blaine.
Thank you very much indeed, Nomawethu. Well, let's head back to People's Space, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and bring in some color back into COP17. And we hear from the voices of the people. Let's take a listen. The soothing sounds all the way from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, People's Space, civil society adding their voice in the fight against climate change. Let's take a bit of a break. We're back live from the ICC in just a moment. Live from the International Convention Center, we're talking COP17. It's the business end, as we say. Now, let's talk Great Lakes, in particular Lake Chad. Now, it's where precious water supply, we're told, are severely under threat. Now, Lake Chad is one of those. It's one of Africa's largest freshwater sources. As a result, malnutrition is on the rise. Now, we're told already contributing to 1/3 of deaths. Very shocking figure. I'll read that again. 1/3 of deaths among children under 5. Now, scientists have warned that the lake may disappear in 20 years. Stark predictions indeed. Let's take a look at this insert.
Early morning on Lake Chad. Musa, like his father and grandfather before him, earns his living fishing. Little has changed in the way that they work. But this way of life, and life itself for those around the lake, is under threat. 10 years ago, these would have been thrown back. Not anymore. Every fish, no matter how tiny, will be shared out in the village.
We give each person one fish. But the problem is, what happens when there are no fish? No fish means no food and no jobs.
From the air, the fishermen's problem is clear to see. What was once one of Africa's largest lakes is now a patchwork of weeds, ponds and islands. Images from space show how a huge body of water 50 years ago is now just a 20th of that size. As the waters have receded, land that was once fertile has turned dusty and barren.
At the start, we didn't know anything about the problems of malnutrition, but now the figures are enormous. The children are all malnourished. There are no more fish. There's no more milk, no maize, vegetables or cereal.
Where food is being grown, it's in irrigated fields like this. But overuse and abuse of the water supply has contributed to the shrinking of the lake. The local community, though, say it's the weather that's the biggest factor. It's now hotter and drier here, a result, they say, of global climate change.
Rich countries must think also of us in Africa, and the poor people here who are in the process of dying because of hunger and shortages of water. Water for us is life. They must help us to survive as a minimum.
This volunteer association is planting trees to stop the spreading of the Sahara Desert. They're hoping it will lead to the lake's return.
I was born here, I grew up here, and I want the lake to come back. Not just for me, but for the children of the future. To stop the Sahara, we must make lots of effort. Day and night, we must work.
Such is the level of desperation that there has even been talk of diverting rivers to refill the lake.
If there are solutions, we must find them. The lake is in the process of disappearing, and the lake feeds many people. Not just here, but in other countries like Nigeria, Cameroon, and Niger. They are all people who live on Lake Chad.
At its current rate of decline, the water could all be gone within 20 years. For the people of Lake Chad, climate change is already a matter of life and death.
And that's how we wrap things up here at the International Convention Center. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you to all our contributors. For myself, Blaine Herman, have yourself a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.